Welcome to The View with Vertex, the show that takes you behind the scenes with some of the most influential people, personalities, and companies shaping the scaffolding industry. He is the owner and founder of Elevation 81.
Ben Beaumont is making an impact, helping leaders and teams build exceptional cultures and strategies, leading the way in the scaffolding and temporary workspace.
What does the future of scaffold design look like?
We think about safety all the way through the design process. Question I've mulled over many times.
Welcome back to The View with Vertex. I have a very special guest in the studio today. He is none other than Ben Beaumont. Ben Beaumont is the director at Scaffplan. He is a former owner of 48.3, the scaffold design company in the UK. He is the owner and founder of Elevation 81, a consulting company that helps businesses grow, expand, etc., etc. That sounds terrible. We'll just keep it rolling. I'm sure Ben will be able to give you a much more in-depth explanation of who he is and exactly what he's all about. Ben, welcome on to The View with Vertex.
Thanks, Isaac. Nice to be here, mate.
It sounds like we've only just started chatting now and like we've not been together all day. It's usually the case.
We always hang out together. I don't know why.
Yeah, like best mate.
Suddenly make it out like this is a new thing, mate.
Yeah, like I don't know you.
I know.
I actually sound
put your top back on as well.
No nipples out this time.
What's going on with that?
I know. So like, you know, the intro sounds like, you just got this guest on who, you know, they don't speak to each other at all and they only know each other in a professional capacity. We do speak quite a lot.
Ever since I gave you my number, I've been regretting it. I swear.
But it's
10 minutes ago you gave Ben. What do you think of this cracked stall board?
Hey? Yeah, well, you got these people in your phone books. Have you seen that with Tyson Fury? And he's got like all these celebrities in his phone book. Not that we're calling ourselves celebrities by any means, but
I'll take that though.
Yeah,
I feel proper.
Well, I've started calling myself a scaffluencer. So
I'm not going to be like, I take the piss out of you calling yourself a scaffluencer.
I
think it's quite funny.
Yeah, well,
but it's only because secretly I want to be a scaffluencer.
It's easy. It's easy. What you do is you get yourself a dog, and you walk around your local park, and you just generally.
Who does that?
I don't know. I couldn't think of anyone in particular.
Is it a trusted method? Or?
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so.
He's not bad at it though, is he? He's all right.
Everyone's got their own thing. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's got their own thing and their own ways of doing it. Like we've got, I think Isaac Morrison's one's enough. And potentially the same for some of us out there as well. And everyone's got their own way of doing things.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure we'll dig into, and we do digress with a lot to talk about. There's a lot been going on with you, I guess personally and professionally.
Just recently, a lot going on, isn't there, mate?
Yeah,
talking about it over
there. Yeah.
Life's boring if it's not.
I totally agree. I totally agree. It's no one has a crystal ball. You can't see into the future. So all you've really got to judge the quality of your life by is the past and what the experiences you've had and the things you've done. I mean, you've already done, you know, great things with 48.3, and then now with Elevation 81, now with Scaffplan. It's easy to get stuck in one place. Keep things moving. That's what I say. Keep things moving. So I guess we'll probably take it back to the start of your journey in scaffold design and in scaffolding generally, really.
Yeah.
Where did it all begin for you and how?
Where did it all begin for me? Obviously, I went to university and studied civil and structural engineering. You know, didn't even know scaffolding. I mean, just seeing it around the house occasionally, you know. Didn't really know there was a role of designing scaffolding until after I finished university. No, it wasn't. It was in my final year in a like Easter holiday or something like this. I went back to Barnsley to see my mum, and my mum were working for this fella called Alwyn Richards at the time. And Alwyn was a lifelong family friend of mine, and I went to see him, and I remember walking into the office, and at the time he used to smoke, and the smoke filled the office kind of down to eye level, and I was like, "You're right, Alwyn?" Talking to him like this. He's like, "All right, kid, yeah, all right." And I just started chatting to him. I was like, "What do you actually do? What do you actually do, Al?" I was like looking at some of these drawings around about the place, thinking these look like construction drawings. You know, I'm a civil engineer. This must be, I was trying to be a civil engineer. I was learning how to be a civil engineer, I guess. I was like, this kind of looks like what I do. He says, "Oh yeah, design scaffolding, Ben." I went, "All right, that's the thing, is it?"
Yeah.
You know, he's like, yeah. 6 months later, I started working for him. And I'd left university, didn't know the first thing about it. and walked in on the first day saying, right, what do I need to know? And he's like, right, the ones that go lengthways begin with an L, they're called ledgers, and the ones that go across, but let's call that transverse, they're called transoms, and the ones that go up and down, some people call them uprights, but they're not the standards. Like, okay,
Crash course.
pretty much. And then a week later, right, kid, you're down at my mate's scaffold yard. You're down there for a month, moving gear, or 2 weeks or whatever it was. I can't remember. It felt like
Oh, really? Like a holiday job sort of thing, or just?
No, you're going down there. You need to move gear around, so you know how heavy it is. You know what fitting is, which one's a double, which one's a swivel. Nothing, do you? How else are you going to learn if you don't?
That sounds so Mr. Miyagi, doesn't it? Like wax on, wax off. You're gonna, but it's probably the right way to do it.
You go down, you start moving, and the bloke sends you for a long stand and a glass hammer and all of that. You know what I mean? And then told that if you can't stand up this 21-foot tube, then you obviously nobody. And then watch you tried for 3 hours, you can't do it because
you're like, that's not my job.
It's jokes. They do all that stuff, and did that.
It's interesting though, because I mean, how many? I don't know. I can think of a few. I think of some really, really good design engineers who've sort of either similar or been on the tools as scaffolders themselves.
There's loads of good ones, right? There's plenty of people out there because that's the way it is. And then like the following month, get on your part one. We were talking about it earlier when I did my part one. And at that point, you think you know everything, and quickly realise you know absolutely nothing.
But it's that practical side of it though that I think. And I know you do the course as well, Secrets of Scaffold Design, and like that hands-on experience, it's invaluable, and we probably need, I reckon, as an industry to be doing more to maybe sort of simulate that. Because let's face it, like not every engineer comes from a scaffolding background, nor should they have to.
Is it easier to teach? Question I've mulled over many times. Is it easier to teach someone with a scaffold engineer and to teach an engineer scaffolding?
Are you still any closer to the answer?
There isn't an answer. It's just a person because there's examples in 40.3 of people who were scaffolders who came in, joined the business and excelled. And then there's people who are engineers and just couldn't get their head around scaffolding, couldn't picture it, couldn't do it. And ultimately it boils down to what scaffolding is, isn't it? Or what scaffold design is, because scaffold design is quite unique insofar as it's an amalgamation of 3 things effectively: buildability and practicality. Obviously, can you build it and can you do it quickly, safely, efficiently? And the trials and tribulations of trying to build a scaffold following SG4 compliantly, make sure everything's in the right place. Then is it commercially viable? Because obviously anyone can design a scaffold and make it.
Yeah, you could land a bloody.
And it's a conversation. Every scaffolding person who's procured design and every design engineer has had the conversation with, why have you got this much gear in?
Yeah.
So you
could design anything, couldn't you? You could drop the QE2 onto it, but like if it doesn't need that, and if we can save materials, then absolutely. So there's
a whole point in itself, and then the third point is it structurally stable, and can you prove it in calculation? And then the main piece is obviously that's layered against your legal duties as a designer and a CDM, stuff like this. But fundamentally, that's quite a unique combination. A lot of people out going there, well, no, surely all temporary works has got to be built, but there's not that many where, they've all got a commercial viability option. Of course they have. They've all got structural adequacy option. Of course they have. But the buildability and practical piece is quite unique for scaffolding. There's probably only formwork that does something similar, or maybe hoarding, but you're not working at height. You're doing it all with your hands, but you're working at height, are you? And often you lift the bits in with a machine anyway, if it's Kentlish blocks and stuff. But then to everything, obviously scaffolding, the first thing you've got to learn is that every piece has to be fixed by a person working in a safe system of work, fixing the next piece as far as they can fix it. And, it's preaching to the choir to scaffolders and to scaffold designers, but you have to think like that to someone. That's the first step you have to think about, and explaining that to someone when they start, right? So going back to what you asked me at the start, how did it start? That's what Alwyn's trying to drum that into your head.
By getting you out there and feeling it.
But then doing it. But the thing is then, you don't have the luxury of going out. You worked in an office in Barnsley, right? You don't have the office of walking out into the yard and having a go with it. So we'd go down to the scaffold. It was SYS in Doncaster. A fella, there's a really good mate to Alwyn. His name was Ronnie Shepherd. Sadly, he's not with us anymore, but his son Darren still works. I think his name's Darren. I just made that up. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Still,
we can edit it if it's not.
Lovely fellow he is. I saw him not so long ago. Yeah, really nice guy. But going down to their yards and learning about it and actually doing it, and trying to learn as much as scaffolder learns, knows, and then and you only have to do it once. When you say, well, why can't? What's wrong with having the joint there in the lift, like above the handrail by your ear or something? And they'll go, well, you try and put that 21 in there. And then you realise how hard it is. You only have to try once, and you're I'm going to do that again, ever. It's like, we used to do. We still did. They still do. I think at 40.3, but we used to do practical training with engineers. We used to do this thing whereby we'd get a 2 6-meter 750 beams, make a 12-meter section, and build it like just in a kicker off the ground. So you'd have 2 1-meter towers at either side. So you were just stood on the ground. And then a bridge between 2 1-meter square towers. So you'd have like a 10-meter beam span. And then we'd draw on the floor in chalk where the river was, that the bridge was going over. And then I'd say to engineers, right, you're going to build the towers. So first they have to set it out. So we'd have a drawing of this thing. And then we'd say, right, you've got to set the tower out. And obviously, if you've never set a scaffold out, scaffolder would do that in
seconds.
2 minutes, 3 minutes max. So we would all stop there, 45 minutes later, like, all right, is it square, is it plumb? There's stuff like this. Anyway, you get that built.
Would you think they'd obsess over stuff like that? Because obviously when you're doing a drawing, it's everything's square and, all the standards are straight.
No, it's the practicality of making it square. So you build it, right? So we get engineers to that. And the thing is, we were good because we had people like in the team who were scaffolders who would lead it, like right at the start. And there's a guy that worked for me called Andrew Kitley, who now has his own business. He was like a scaffolder, and he would lead that course. And then we'd have others. Alex Kirk did it quite a few times. Jack Bond did it quite a few times. People with scaffolding backgrounds, and they would then help teach, supervise, support. Mark Parkin obviously did it quite a few times while they were at 48.3. Help teach and support the engineers who never done it before. The whole point was that wasn't the point. You get them to say it out, but then you go. This was just one of the exercises we get them to do. Normally, we get them to build like a lifter, independent, and birdcage and stuff like this as well. But then
quite intensive, isn't it? I mean,
the thing is, right, because no one can work. You've got to do it all on the ground because we're not harness trained. They're not working at height trained, and we're not going to go through that process. The point isn't to teach them to work at height. The point is to teach them how hard it is to build scaffold. Yeah. So then we'd go get the beam. What I was going to say is, and then we do stuff like we'd get someone to draw it who've not done it before, just to trip them up or whatever. I don't know, but maybe it's a bit harsh. And then we go, right, here's your drawing. Now you're going to lace and brace that beam. But you can't obviously touch the floor where the river is. So they'd stand on the bank and they'd be passing the gear out to each other and they'd be working. And then they'd suddenly start realizing, this is not that easy, actually, is it?
Yeah.
And, when, then people would start realizing, well, why would I put the bottom chord transom below the bottom chord? Like, why would you draw it there?
Yeah.
You see that on some boards, right? Yeah. When it's not a support. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, so which way around do you put the fitting? When you're trying to fix, and it's the same applies to any ledger, right? Which way around do you put the fitting when it's not like this so you can rest the tube in it? If you've never done that before and then you draw the fitting that way, well, that takes 2 hands and it's difficult and you've got to try and hold it and do it up. It's like, come on.
But people will, I don't know whether you'd say less experienced or more experienced. I've seen some scaffolders who are really, really they stay true to the drawing. And if it's drawn underneath the cord, then it's going underneath the cord.
Yeah, no, because
like some of us might go, we'll go back to the engineer with that.
Yeah, but why does that happen? Because you get these often overzealous inspectors. What are you doing this morning? These inspectors who all fought. You're like, well, it's not as per the drawing, but they haven't got the common sense. No, it's not common sense. That's not true. They have got the common sense. They probably know, but they know that they think or know that if it's not exactly as per the drawing, then they're not following the drawing, and therefore is it a deviation? It was insured, blah blah blah. When the reality is, the transom's below the cord or above the cord, it's still doing its job of tying the beam cord. So it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever, right? Yeah. So anyway, the point, they'd do it and they'd base it, they'd do it all, and then they'd realise stuff like that, and then they go, well, it's actually quite hard to thread these 2 rows of plan bracing through these beams. Do you know what I mean? And then well, imagine there were another beam next to it and another beam, so you've got like a gantry or something. Oh yeah, it's really hard. So, right, so
I've seen people with spanners in the fucking mouths. Do you know what I mean? Because they're like, stick that in there, and they've, when you're in a really tight space.
How do you carry your gun in your mouth?
It's tethered, obviously. Always tethered. Yeah,
it's just like a gum shield.
Yeah. But I mean, it's challenging to sometimes stay absolutely consistent to a drawing. And I suppose there's only so much
point, right? So if you're gonna if people are gonna have that, you've got to make sure it's right. But that's we're talking about practical buildability. You've got to just make sure that's true, and that's why. In that point, the blend of the team, the skills in the team is super important. So having people like all those people I just mentioned before, I learned a lot from Andrew, from Alex, from Jack, from Mark, and people have done it from Alwyn. Alwyn had his own scaffold business. He knew how scaffolding went together as well as anybody. And then you learn, because the thing that a good scaffold designer does, that's what I usually say to people, is the difference is we have to build it in our head. Scaffolders have to build it with their hands. Obviously, let's get it right. Us imagining it building in our head, get it right here, because it's way easier from me in this chair in this office to get this right than a scaffolder 30 meters up in the air trying to figure out how to get it right. And you've put the tube in the wrong place, or a joint in the wrong place, or the fitting in the wrong place, or do you know what I mean? Something that just makes the life difficult. And then you come back to that point I said to you before about practicality, buildability. So that's it. But then commercial viability as well. It takes twice as long to fix the tube underneath than it does to fix the tube on the top. What we were talking about before, doesn't it? So get them all right, and you add all them little things up. It's like,
yeah,
Dave Brailsford. It's like marginal gains across the scaffold. But the irony is, you put in a whole run of scaffolding up, them tiny little things will make a difference over the whole thing, and that'll save you an hour.
Yeah, I think you hear a lot of people mention, about all the work being at the standards, right? So
every nodes, right?
Yeah, everything has to be connected, at the standards of the nodes. And the more of those you put in, you're not just saying put that standard on that ledger with a double. You're now saying put that standard on that ledger with a double, connect 2 handrails to that standard on that ledger with doubles.
Yeah.
And that's for every lift, for maybe a 20-30 lift job. And if there are ways of negating that, maybe smaller bays or something, it's having that. How do you teach that? How do you teach someone to have that as one of the first considerations, or one of the top 3 considerations we've said?
Time, experience, I guess. I mean, some people never get it right. Some people never think of it. Everyone's had a scaffold design that works on paper and structurally stands up but can't be built.
Two things spring to mind. This is often, a criticism you hear levied at scaffold designers.
One, bothered.
They just design it like that because they can't be asked, for want of a better phrase.
Oh, that's how they've always done it.
But you could possibly add that as a third, but I think that's something that would be experienced more at your end from, the design engineer's point of view. From the scaffolder's point of view, I think the perception is it's either they couldn't be asked and it was easy to do it that way, or they're overcompensating, like they're over-engineering it. You hear that, so you must hate that term, over-engineering. Or do you? I mean, I don't know.
Well, let's take them both in turn. You might have to write me what the second one is, though, right? So the first one, absolutely right, and no one should. It's not just scaffold design. You should never do that. And the reality is, I used to teach people, when every person I've always trained, the first question you ask on a site visit, once you've understood what they're trying to do, like what the problem is, we need to get to the side of that bridge, or we're going to, the old cliche, change that light bulb, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? Once you understand what it is, the first question I always ask the scaffolder, which there is, how would you do it? How would you do it? Because if you've got a way in your mind that you want to do it, and I can make that work, let's do that. Because that's the safest, quickest, and probably the most efficient for you. Because however you are visualizing it, that's clear in your head.
Yeah.
So tell them what that is, and so that'll be the starting point for how do you want to do it. And then if they say something like, that's not going to work, and I know
I'm going to tie it to that lamppost.
Yeah. Well, you say something like that, and then you'll start. Well, we can do that, but what about this bit? We might have to do something there. I might have to do something. Then you can start tweaking it. But ultimately, if you start from a point that the scaffolder wants to work from, like if the bit that they want, then that's much easier. So ask that first. And if they go, but I ain't got a clue how we're going to do this, to be honest, mate. It looks like a right nightmare, which happens occasionally. Okay, then you step in and it's the other end. Okay, what about if we did this? What about if we did this? What stock have you got in your yard? Have you got this kind of name? Would you use system for this or tube and fit him? Blah, blah, blah. How are we going to get to that first point? Could we get a MUP in here to get you up to the first point to start the hanger so we don't have to build? Do you know what I mean? Whatever. There's a plethora of different.
So,
but the point being is, it used to drive me insane. I've worked for a few people before I had 3. Alwyn, not the same. Alwyn would always do that too. He was very good at it. But there'd be people who would just kind of, no, this is my way or the highway kind of attitude. Bit, you know what I mean? And it's just like, you're not going to get the best solution is always a blend of everyone's ideas. You know, I say that all the time. I say it all the time. And my job is to give you the most practical, buildable, commercially viable solution. So you're going to think about the kit you've got in the yard, what you're familiar with, the stuff you're used to fixing, right? And that makes it adds all those things up because the safest way is the safe way you're most familiar with, assuming that you don't get complacent, right? But let's assume.
Yeah.
So then the second point you said was what?
So
I told you you'd have to remind me.
Yeah. So the second point being that it's over-engineered or they're overcompensating and trying to. I think overcompensating probably sounds a bit harsh, but
they probably just. I mean, I guess everyone's been accused of that, right? But then you don't understand the position that the person levying that comment is coming from. They see that based on their own perception of the world, right? Their own rose-tinted spectacles. But every designer has a different level of competency, I guess. And if you're looking at it, we would always try and engineer everything up to the capacity of the critical members. So obviously in a scaffolding, not in a scaffold, not every member is loaded the same. You know, you've got some standards that got more load in them than others.
Yeah.
But generally, you're building them to a predefined set of criteria, set of pattern. You know, it's defined in TG20 or how you taught on your things, you know, bay sizes, lifts, etc. How you can build, how far you can reach. It's all pretty standard. We're doing it for a long period of time. So the components in the scaffold, some of them are more heavily loaded than others. You identify the critical members and where they are, and you'd always try and load them to their absolute maximum because that effectively is as efficient as possible. You know, and you'd call that phrase its utilization ratio. So how heavily, like how utilized is it? It's that right up to 100%. So if its capacity is 10 kilonewtons and it's got 10 kilonewtons in it, its utilization ratio is 100%, right? It's on its limit. So you'd want to get the critical members up to that point so that you know you've got the optimum amount of gear in it. Because if you've got utilization ratios that are really low, you know, you've got too much material in it. So that, I mean, there's a point where you can start stripping it out, but you know, you make the lifts higher, make the bays wider, but you couldn't build it, or it then doesn't conform within TG20 or whatever, right? But the point being is, don't put more gear in than you need. What we talked about before, right? Because it should. I think that is part of your legal duty as an engineer. It falls under CDM. So, and how you interpret CDM is that it is each to their own, right? But if you think,
with a lot of areas of legislation,
no, it's each. That's not fair. It's not each to their own. It's pretty clear how you interpret a CDM in terms of your responsibilities for hazard elimination, risk mitigation, communication of residual risks, all this kind of stuff, right? But if you're over engineering a job or you're not designing it as optimally as you can, what are you doing? You're putting more material in it than it needs. So therefore, the consequence of that is a person has to do more manual handling than there needs to be done. They have to work at height for more time than needs to be done. They've got to move that object up and down, more chance of it being dropped or slipped or whatever, you know. So, but by just putting more gear in it, park the side why you put more gear in it to one side over here, but just by putting more gear in it, are you being negligent?
You're certainly increasing the risk, aren't you?
You know, I'm just going 1-2 steps further. I'm getting right to the point. You're increasing the risk, right? So that's not part of this. That's what I mean before about commercial viability, right? You've got to make it as efficient as possible and that's not just from a making money point of view. That's from a safe point of view. You want to put the minimum amount of gear in it. You know what I mean? Why have 6 fittings in it when you can do it with 4?
These are the objections you hear from scaffolders. I mean, like, again, there's
totally. But then, how many people actually take the time to have this conversation? Our longest, the clients that I used to have at 48.3, that were the longest serving clients had this. We'd had this conversation with them. We'd build up this a great relationship where they knew how I was going to approach it, and they'd challenge me and go, well, what about if we do this? What about if we took that on? And sometimes it would go, you know, that's actually a really good idea. Let's do that. I wish I'd have thought of that. You know? But then other times you'd have to explain to them why that's not going to work. You know, whatever, whether it's a capacity or whatever it is, it's not going to work. But that's where it is, and it's. It's just.
It's one of them. It's on yours. Could you say it's trainable or not trainable? To have a design engineer working like that. I mean, you seem to have done it at 48.3. So you say,
of course, it's trainable.
So you would say
everything's teachable.
Yeah.
I mean, when you come out of school, you don't know anything, do you? So of course, it's trainable. Everything is teachable. Everything. You just got to have the right attitude and the right mindset and come out. But we'll maybe talk about it later. But it's like that's the only way to design scaffolding, in my opinion. That's how you do it. So that's how we teach it. We had a kind of philosophy, the design values or design philosophy at 40.3, which I wrote. And, this was essentially right at the start, me and writing it and Gav Dempsey having input on it. Andrew would have had input on it. Luke and Michael would have had input on the people early at the start of 40.3 that were there, and that journey would have contributed to it. But they were like, the first one was buildability. Is it buildable? The second one's commercial viability, what we just touched on. Next one's safety through design, which had a dual meaning. The last one's collaboration. The last one being...
And they're like the core principles.
They're the core principles how we design. We've got to hit all them on every single design. We talked about the first two. Collaboration, we talked about, start with the question, how would you do it? What do you think? What is this? Listen to everybody else first before you go and speak. And it's not, that get everyone's input and then try and meet their needs. That's the easy way. So that's the fourth one, collaboration. Then safety through design. The point we've talked about is not. It had a dual meaning that I used to like saying to people, we think about safety all the way through the design process, which is your job, right? You've got to try and look for hazards, eliminate them where you can't mitigate the risk associated to them. And that happens through the design process as you're making decisions as you go through, right? But then also, let's create safety through our design. So let's create a solution that is as inherently safe as possible through the solution that we design ourselves. So it's got that dual meaning. It's a process and it's an outcome.
Yeah, I think a lot of that speaks to culture as well. The culture of the organisation. It's another topic of itself. I'm sure it's something that we'll probably get into a little bit later on in the conversation. What does the future of scaffold design look like in the UK or generally?
Great question, mate. I mean, no one ever paid for me to bring the crystal ball out of the office. The fee was always too big. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure. I think I've left the crystal ball now. But the thing, well, look, it's obviously becoming more and more prevalent, isn't it? The design of scaffolding. People always think, "Oh, I used to be able to do that without design and stuff."
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't. It's absolute rubbish. And then my other, sorry, I'm not answering the question, but another favourite one people always says to me, "You used to be able to do that to 5973." No, you didn't. Straight up. The 5973 had a far narrower scope of what you could build than TG20.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just no one ever enforced it.
Yeah.
So no one knew any better. So the difference now is that the industry is more educated, and so they know the rules.
Yeah, it's like we've almost got to this place where we've now got TG20, we've got the e-portal, we've got the e-guide, and that can just take care of a lot of standard solutions for scaffolding that we never had that before. And now, and it's always going to be a limited scope.
I don't know if you remember this, right? But when TG20 come out, I remember TG20 e-guide came out, and I remember Dan Norton ringing me up, going from Scaffman, and he goes, "Dan, Ben, can we ever talk about this e-guide?" And I can't remember how long this way. It might even be when TG20 first came out. Scaffbag's been around for quite a long time now, similar time to 43.
Well, TG20 was that 05 and then 08.
05, right? So it first came when the standard solutions were first in it. Ran up and went, "Oh, how do you feel about the e-guide taking all your business?" And I remember he said, I was like, "Mate,
how wrong he was." He's probably generated more. I would say.
To be fair to him, it's a great question to ask, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great question, and he's absolutely bang on asking it. And
he should do this job.
I thought it was good for him, mate. I'm on there next week. Scad, yeah. He was he asked me that question, and I remember just kind of I remember pausing and thinking about it.
Yeah.
And thought pretty much saying that. I said, I don't think it will. I think we'll end up having more work as a result of this, because people will then realise they ought to have a design, and actually they'll realise they can't design it to that. So they'll have to come to people like us to get it designed.
Mm-hmm. I think when you make a
and that's
narrow
what
scope, well, it's not a narrow scope, it's a fairly comprehensive scope, but when you make a scope that's a clearly defined scope of standard solutions, standard scaffolds, then there are parameters. It's either compliant or it's not compliant. And that, even though that was the case before, it was never defined as the case, or people didn't understand that that was the case. So if anything, you've got more flexibility to do things without design now, but people are now understanding that there are things outside of what is.
I get real funny about the terminology that people use, right? And I'm going to pick
standard.
No,
solution
without a design. Everything's designed. Every scaffold needs a design. I get real picky. Sorry to pick you up, but if people think, oh, you don't need a design for that. You do. You're just using a standard solution, like you just said.
Right, yeah.
Right. So you either have a standard solution,
which is designed,
or a bespoke design.
Yeah.
So the standard solution could be a compliant sheet. It could be like a technical manual by Ultrad or Bilfinger. You know, these big companies that have technical manuals. It could be a manufacturer's
instruction
manual, you know, whatever that is. Or it could be the scaffolder. And for years and years, it was the scaffolder designing it, how he was taught in his part 2 or his advanced course, right? They taught you to a standard solution that they knew would work. He is then repeating that he's actually the designer and he's using a standard solution, right? So it's always designed. The question is, when it doesn't fall like that, it's then bespoke design. So, you know, it's a fallacy to think that you don't need a design. You always do. That's the point. So
no,
I'll leave you with this, right? I'll make this point before we actually get into what the future looks like and all of that. I think in 2004, when I started designing scaffolding for
which is when we moved over to the Eurocode, right?
No, that was in 2003. 12811 is 2003.
But was it implemented in the UK?
There was an
we were duty bound, weren't we, as a member state?
Its date. I don't, mate. The exact date. You asked you. Come on, dude.
Tell me the fucking day, Ben.
It's definitely 2003, mate. It's BSEN 12811 Part 1 is in 2003, and then Eurocode for Win 1991 Part 4 was 2005. TG20 had an implementation period where they were like, we still worked to 5973 before TG20 come in. There was a crossover period, like a window, right? And first TG20 came out in 2005. Well, I was thinking, when in 2004, I remember thinking, who are our competition? And there weren't that many scaffold design companies around, right? But then there was, maybe 10, and I remember we were good mates with Phil Barber, who was up the road. Phil had, and then there was Scafftech, Optima,
RDG.
Not that I can remember back then. We never came across them. Certainly not in the north. There was, Scafftech, Optima, Phil Barber, Alan Paul and Scaffold Design Limited in Sheffield. And then there was, not long after us, there'd been 2H, which was Rob and Chris. And I'm not sure who was in the south. Who did it? I don't know. I never really designed much further south than Birmingham. And then but now I was looking the other day for potential customers of Scaffplan, I got to 40 design companies right now, and I just without really searching on Google or just writing them down, all the ones that I know, got to 40. I was like, wow. So I mean they vary in size, right? Between one person, some of them are 15, 20 people maybe, but
it's probably 5 or 6x if you're going to use
massive, right? Yeah. So it's massive growth. So why is that? Well, obviously, compliance sheets didn't steal all the business, did they?
No, exactly.
It's just that everything's being more designed, more things are being designed that should have been designed.
And we're going to talk about Scaffplan definitely, probably a little bit later on. There's a couple of more points I wanted to go over before we got there. But I could, as much as we're saying Scaffplan, there's a potential there for that to do away with a lot of the work of designers. And I think you could probably I agree. By the way, I agree. But I
That'll
think
never
some
happen.
people will say, "Oh, it's going to take all the work." I reckon that idea will be out there.
It can.
With
It won't. I had a conversation with
as
someone
much as
about
like
this.
AI is going to steal all our jobs or whatever.
I mean, the thing is, that will never happen for a few different reasons, which we can talk about now. We can talk about later. It's up to you.
Well, we'll talk about them now because I did want to ask about the you wrote the temporary works forum and all that kind of stuff. But I guess this nice neat segue into that.
Let me say one thing before we do, right?
Go on.
There's one thing when you asked me before where I didn't say it. It's about what is the future of scaffold design. If I were to say one thing about what I would like the future of scaffold design to be like, and you can't predict what the output will be like, but it's generally for the industry to start actually taking itself more seriously and realizing how good it is. There's so many people just use this like, it's just scaffold design. And that then gives them permission to be mediocre or not try hard or not set the bar high enough and drive quality. Now, there's plenty of people out there that do set the bar high enough and drive standards forward, right? Loads. But there's plenty of people that don't, and they let themselves off the hook like that. And, taking what... When I was looking, I don't know how many chartered engineers there are that specialize in the design of scaffolding, but when I was at 48.3, 90% of them were at 48.3, right? So, we went on and that was one of the benefits of joining Richter. We've shared that value of professional qualification, and they helped us facilitate that in the last missing link, really. But if scaffold designers weren't very good and they didn't meet the criteria, if like the benchmark, for want of a better phrase, without getting into the technicalities of what it is, then how would so many people get chartered so quickly or become incorporated engineers or engineering technicians so quickly if they weren't meeting the grade anyway? They'd have to then go on this period of learning, but they weren't. We're already at that level, right? And people tonight start thinking scaffold design is actually it's really hard to do it right. It's a pure structural design profession.
And touching on those variables that and those criteria at the start,
wind application of wind is tricky in scaffolding, and the way that scaffolding behaves, the way that it moves, the way that it responds to wind, how you deal with,
especially with cheaper fitting, where everything's like you say, everything's connected.
How you deal with local and global stability issues created by wind or environmental loading, and all this kind of stuff. It's a challenge. And if you actually do all the different attributes that come from being a chartered engineer, for example, there's others. There's technical ones, and people think, it's just scaffolding, but it's not. You take a complicated scaffold, a freestanding temporary roof, a facade retention, something that's technically challenging. You meet those technical criteria if you've applied the loads properly, you've applied the codes of practice properly, you've done the analysis properly. You're meeting that criteria up there. And then the others are stuff like health and safety, what we just talked about earlier. Lead management and leadership, sustainability, commercial. The other attributes. Actually, if you do the job and you project manage and you manage your projects well, and you manage teams and stuff like that, and you quote and you deal with contracts and stuff, you meet those criteria. And scaffold designers need to start thinking of themselves as professional civil engineers who just happen to specialize in temporary works, and within that field they just happen to specialize in scaffolding. Cool, that's great, but we're at that level, and we ought to be thinking and aspiring to that level and trying to achieve that. And that's one of the good things about being at Richter. They drove that forward, and that was cool, and it really was beneficial. And there's lots of people at 48.3 that benefited from that, and hopefully those people can help other people like I help other people. And I know Evic and Gav and Mark Gilroy and people like this mentor and sponsor people outside of our organization as well to do the same thing. So, it's great. That's what the future should look like, that striving to make it better, drive standard forward, and actually put ourselves on a par with every other former temporary works engineer out there or civil engineer.
Is that part of your mission within the Temporary Works Forum? To drive that?
When I first started going to the Temporary Works Forum meetings, there was no one else there talking about scaffolding. Not really. No one really there were other temporary works consultants engineers that could design scaffold, but
They just didn't. Oh,
well,
they
they
weren't.
just did it occasionally
Yeah.
amongst the other 30 forms of temporary works that they'd also designed. So they were multidisciplined engineers and were very good at being multidisciplined, whereas we are obviously much more focused around the 6 to 7 forms of temporary works that you can build with scaffold, or typically build with scaffold. You won't find scaffold designers designing cofferdams, but similarly, if you specialize in scaffold design, you're not going to design scaffold. So very different skill sets and very different knowledge base. But yeah, I think part of it, not necessarily I'd go around saying it to people, but was to kind of promote the scaffolding industry and drive it forward and push it forward. And when I first started 48.3, I wasn't allowed to join the NASC because there was a certain, I don't know whether they've still got it now, but your business had to be in business for a certain period of time before they'd let you join.
Yeah,
I think that
was the case for the full contractor members. I don't know what it's like for supplier members and our design members, but for me as an SAP member,
well, back then I weren't allowed to join, and so I was like, well, that kind of sucks. So I was like, all right, no problem, and I remember trying to join the technical committee for ages. Like I was on a waiting list. I think I got blackballed a few times by people because obviously I was outspoken a little bit, probably. Eventually,
I think the industry's lacking that, to be fair. Really.
Eventually got through the door, but then, well, that's a different story. Anyway, but yeah, the TWF, I think so. But now, fast forward to now, when I first joined it, there was like 25, 22 members, maybe 20 members. Member companies, not people. Obviously, when your company joins, the employees within that become members and can engage as well. Well, anyone can engage, quite frankly, with it. Anyone can contribute, but can invited to get involved or encouraged to get involved, should I say. And now we've got 250, 280 members, something like that. I don't know the exact number. And quite a reasonable proportion of them, there'll be 20, 25 in scaffolding related businesses. So, there wasn't many. There's only one. Probably
that has to be a positive thing for the industry. I mean, the NASC, I think they do a lot of great work. And, talking about being members of different organisations, and I get a lot of value out of being an NASC member. I think the e-guide and the e-portal for one thing, and the guidance documents.
Don't take anything away from NASC. Done some blinding work, and all the people over the years that have contributed to all them technical guidances, health and safety guidance, contract, they all put that time and energy in for free.
But it's kind of preaching to the choir almost, because we see the value of it, and I think it is changing where now there's a drive to get people on as information members and getting that information out to the principal contractors and making them see, how professional the scaffolding industry is. But I think the Temporary Works Forum seems to be doing an equally good job of that, of trying to raise the standards and raise the profile of scaffolding.
There's one subtle difference, and the reason why I joined the TWF at the start is that even though I'll give you some background real quick so it makes sense. The TWF is a non-for-profit organisation, right? So they're completely funded by their members, paying a membership fee. And our job as directors, I've been a director of the TWF now for 10 years. I mean, going into my 11th year, is to put that money to the best use for industry, not for our members. Our members join under the understanding that they will be contributing to the TWF, they will be paying a membership fee, but that will be paid to raise standards everywhere and help everybody, not just raise the membership of the TWF. Hence why all of the guidance documents that the TWF do, whether that be a document, a press release, a safety issue report, or more recently, the last few years, e-learning, it's all free and available to anybody. And we encourage anyone to use it and use it. You know what I mean? So you've got the best people in the industry contributing to those guidance documents, putting down and trying to define what best practice looks like, providing that thought leadership, creating an environment where we can have open discussion about best practice, promoting it, and then making that available to all. Because the reality is, it's not the big member companies of the TWF really that need that. It's like, take NAC, it's exactly the same. You take, who's the biggest member? Is it Altrad or Linden? SGB will be one, probably the biggest fee-paying member of NAC, right? They generally need that guidance less than
I think
fellas out in the street with the
potentially
transit
more
van and
instrumental in producing that guidance as well.
No,
I think
exactly.
NASC look at a lot of what those companies do.
No, my point is they don't. The members are the people.
Yeah.
It's preaching to the choir, right?
Yeah.
It's actually the people outside the NSC that actually need that guidance the most,
Yes.
and would benefit the most from it, because that would then bring all the level of the industry up, right? So the TWF's point is there's lots of builders out there, lots of small contractors out there, there's lots of people, and there's plenty of big contractors, new people coming into industry, you know, people coming from abroad and don't know what British standard is or how we work. There's all sorts of reasons why you'd want to know. But we'll provide that for anybody, and the expectation is that's it. If you're going to get involved, we'll never commercialize
it's the rising tide that lifts all the boats, if you will.
Right. So, you know, you look back at what he did. TWS is a specialist knowledge society of the ICE, so they're reasonably closely linked. They, you know, they've created countless guidance documents over the years. I've written one, you know, the effective management of scaffolding guide, and put a lot of time and energy into it. We created a centre of excellence at City University, first ever MSc at any university in the UK dedicated to temporary works design, right? Me and Evic lectured on that course for 6 years. Evic still does, I think.
You know, all for the betterment of the
the betterment of the industry, right? So I mean, shameless plug, but there's the e-learning guide on the effective management of scaffolding, which was based on the guidance document of the same name published by the TWF, which for TWF members is accepted as defining best practice to manage it. And kind of what it does, it takes the requirements of BS 5975 for all temporary works and just gives it context in terms of scaffolding.
Yeah,
because scaffolding is actually quite well regulated, and historically that regulation came from work at height regulations, right?
Yeah,
as well as your standard health and safety regulation that apply to all businesses, but work at height drove scaffolding. So there's a lot of good stuff that scaffolders naturally did that met the correct. That was just, you know, called something different in the context of BS 5975, and we wanted to make sure people knew that, and then actually understood what their duties were under BS 5975, ergo under CDM. So that's why the document came about, and there's some great people contributing.
And off the back of that, the
e-learning guide, which was great. You know, SGB contributed to that. We talked about them, or Linden SGB.
It was Town Hall, wasn't it?
Manchester Town Hall, great.
Some project,
right? Insane. Every scaffold designer or scaffolder would love walking around that. It's wicked. Jaw dropping in places. Wicked. Really, really good.
But they're not the only company on there either, are they?
What?
I should say this. Manchester, there is another company on there as well, and they've done great work in there also. So I'll give them a plug. 3D. They've done some work in there as well, but it's an absolute spectacle to even from outside to look around.
All the stuff up the top is wicked, and they really helped us film it. And there was various other people in the industry who were members of the TWF that volunteered, and we've created that with the help of the production company. Who were great. TWF funded the production of that. The members' fees funded the production of that, and we've done one every year for the last 3 years. The other two on temporary works general awareness and on the role of the DI in the, you know, there's a point that every scaffolding owner, operator should watch. You know, who knows what the DI is and what their role is and their legal duties. Anyway, but we created one every year, and I was totaling up how much time I'd spent on it and it got over 500 hours of volunteer time to produce that e-learning guide and the revision to the guide that supported it. And you're thinking, you're putting 500 hours in your own time for what? For the betterment of the industry, right? Paying it forward. We were talking about it. Because you believe in it. You know, no one gets paid. No one gets paid at the TWF to produce all this guidance document. They're doing it for the love, and the duty they feel to support industry and and share their best practice.
Yeah, it raises the profile, doesn't it, as well. As much as it gets really critical, important information out into the hands of the people who need it, whether the members are paid members or not. By proxy, it does raise the profile. Some people who weren't perhaps as familiar with scaffolding and scaffold design would, I'd imagine, watch that or take part in the e-learning course and think, fucking hell, I really didn't know.
Right,
there was so much involved.
One of the best things that could do is that even if we don't reach that many scaffolding contractors with it, let's hope we do. It would be great if we did. But if principal contractors, tier ones, watched it and then they think, crikey, there's quite a bit involved with that scaffolding, isn't there? And then they give it the respect, planning, thought, consideration it deserves. It give the opportunity for the vast majority of scaffolding contractors that just want to do a good job. It give them the opportunity to actually come and do a good job. You know, Alvin, first thing he said to me in week 1, he said, Ben, scaffolding, it's the first thing people need and the last thing people think of. Right? And it's so true. And, you know, applied to this, if it wasn't the first thing people or last thing people thought of and they actually thought about it earlier, and that, you know, that's something that I tried to do a lot of when we were at 48.3 in building services to support principal contractors in managing and procuring temporary works and scaffolding, right? But if it wasn't, then they'd have a much better chance at doing the job more effectively, more efficiently, safely, on time, on budget, all of these things that they actually say they want. But because they've only given the scaffolding contractor 2 weeks to plan,
and they're giving them zero design brief.
No brief, this 500 grand's worth of scaffold, can you start tomorrow?
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
what results were you expecting?
Well, you know what I mean? It's, you know, everyone will have been there. Everyone in the scaffolding industry has been a while. Will relate to that point one way or another, right? Because we've all been there.
Yeah.
And, you know, it pains me to say, oh, if only this were true, you know, your inability to plan is not my problem. But ironically, your inability to plan is absolutely my problem.
Yeah.
And it's my only problem, and I've got to figure out how I do it. And you have no time. And so then a scaffold company, which the vast majority of scaffolding designers work for, scaffolding contractors, you've got no time to produce a design, let alone get a good brief, understand what it is, go through the process, do, put some thinking time into it, come up with a brilliant solution, make sure the drawing's excellent, collaborate with everyone that needs to collaborate with.
All the things that you told you're supposed to.
All this stone stuff. Yeah, when they go, I need this facade retention doing. Okay, great. Yeah, when do you need it tomorrow? Oh, it's Tuesday. When do you need to start building it? Friday.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
It's a knock-on effect, isn't it?
Give us a chance. I think
that leads neatly onto sort of Scaffplan. Because I think a lot of what you mentioned there, from my understanding of Scaffplan, will potentially help to streamline some of those, and help to resolve some of those issues. How do you see Scaffplan changing the way we design scaffolds?
Hopefully, doing all the things that I talked about earlier: buildability, practical design, commercial viability, structural integrity, collaboration, making all of that easier, quicker, more effective, more accessible, against a backdrop of having no time. And if something needs to change, it needs to change now, and you've got to deal with it quick. It just makes all that easier. It's probably worth saying first, what is scaffolding? You touched on it, a Scaffplan. You said, is it going to put scaffold designers out of business? And it's funny that one of the first people I had a conversation with after, well, it's actually before I'd even publicly.
You was going to say come out then, weren't you?
Ironically, Simon's called it that and was just literally ripping the piss for ages, man. And I was like, this is just so funny. But no, announced it. I feel like, I don't know, announced that was happening because I was working at Scaffplan since probably September last year.
Right.
But I didn't tell, actually came out if you cut that bit, I swear you're going to fall out, bro.
So made public the knowledge that you were at Scaffplan.
So Ben came out in February. Yeah, I mean, that's cool, so what? Anyway, but look, the point being, working there a long time, one of the first people I spoke to about it, it was like, we can't be using that Scaffplan thing. It's going to put all those designers out of business. I was like, what? And he referred me back to some posts that Scaffplan put on, a year before or whatever it was, on social media somewhere. It said it's gonna, we're gonna alluded to something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we need to rectify that, because first and foremost, that's not what's going to happen. The thing is, with Simon driving it, one of the real benefits that he's done, you understand where Scaffplan came from. It was a tool that Simon Boyce, who was the founder of Scaffplan, created for his technical team at Benchmark in Australia, right? And they went through lots of different softwares and they wanted a tool for them to use. And because Simon's a scaffolder by trade and not an engineer by trade. He wanted it to make it highly automated because he wanted to be able to model a scaffold and put it in a tender document. He kind of knew what it would be, and he wanted the software to make sure it didn't make any stupid glaring errors and stuff like that. But ultimately, he's creating a prelim for comment, right, for in design speak. Before that process was accessible to more people, so that they could produce accurate models and 3D models of and therefore renders and stuff of what and fly-throughs, etc., of what that scaffold is going to look like. But it still has to be then calced, assessed, risk assessed, blah blah blah, by an engineer and checked by another competent engineer and out the door, right? So the point, it's a bit like if it was going to get rid of designers, the analogy is a bit like creating a self-driving car. If we were creating a self-designing software, it would get rid of design, but that's not what it's going to be. It's not like a self-driving car. That's a very different beast. You still have to be in control of it. We're just trying to create a really great looking, high performing, fast car that gets you there quicker and more effectively. And
it's a good analogy.
The analogy, right? But then, so yeah, that's how you want to think about it. But if you think about that in the terms of liability in the UK construction industry, if Scaffplan was the designer and got rid of it, then how would we possibly and effectively deal with our legal duties under CDM as a designer? Do you know what I mean? It could not do that. It couldn't assess hazards. It couldn't assess risks or, mitigate risk associated hazards and do all this stuff. It couldn't do it. So what we're doing is just creating a really great tool and a really good tool. So instead of it eliminating, what took 20 hours might take 10 hours. Calcs took 10 hours before, it might take 4 hours to do it now. It's that kind of tool. It makes everything quicker and more efficient.
It's so much more than that as well. From the conversations we've had, it's like, and I know there's so much more in the pipeline for it that's under development and it's going to be released. And I think that's the exciting part about it for me. Is it's so new and like it's the things that people want are being built, and even now before they're built, it's still an amazing piece of kit.
It's really cool, right? And it's the rate of development, because we've got so many a really great, strong, incredibly talented design development team. The rate of change is quick, and they're developing it really fast. So we are making lots of changes, making those improvements continuously, and it's really, really cool. So it comes out fast. But yeah, you're totally right. One of the most exciting things about it is the potential that it's got. And we're only at the beginning of that journey. It's got so much cool stuff. The next release will be out soon, and it's. I could sit here and do you a big sell about it, and that would be cool. But let's just say this: it's the pain. Let's think about the pains that scaffold designers often have, or that contractors have. You're thinking about stuff like, or one of the reflections onto Scaffold will be, we don't get much information about the existing structure. How could we possibly create that in 3D? Well, it's really easy. Come on a demo, we'll show you. Whether that's importing point clouds or drawing it from PDFs or using the tools within Scaffplan to do that, bringing it in from, SketchUp warehouse. And there's so many different ways you can do it really, really quickly, just quicker than it would take you to trace around a PDF and port it in and get rid of all the layers you don't need and all this kind of stuff, right? Just as quick. Other pains, dealing with checkers comments, right? Is another one. The collaboration tools in Scaffplan that leverage Trimble Connect are really, really cool. And it happens so fast and it's so clear because it's there, the real life model. And you can do that collaboration piece, which facilitates at the start of the design process is collaboration. And then as the design's gone, it becomes change management, which is a totally different piece. And it's, when you do have change management out on site, and you're dealing with
it's not a quick process at the minute.
Well, what would happen? Imagine you go to survey a job, and then when the scaffolders come to build it, there's a trench bin jug in the way.
Mm-hmm.
You turn a corner, come around the return that morning to start, and there's a trench. You're like, that weren't meant to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Scaffold. What would have to happen? Scaffold would have to stop, photograph of trench, how deep it is, back to designer, mark up on the drawing exactly where it is. email that back. They then look at it. Then they ring them up, probably have a chat with it.
So, well, actually, those pullbacks that you put in, we can't put in because they've also done X, Y, and Z.
Whatever it
It's
might
a
be,
long-
right? But it's drawn out.
Yeah.
And then they have to update the drawing, and then they have to do model split, then all the drawings, but then uprev them, and then send it back. Then now, what's the scaffolder doing at that time? It's not what they're going to do. You've got 2 days delay then at best. So
You can't really pass on to
if you're
anybody.
going to try and do all the temporary works process properly, I mean, let's be honest, what you try and do is give them a solution there to keep them going as best you can. But that process has not been followed, and then they might get it wrong, and there's potential for miscommunication and blah, blah, blah.
Or someone jumping the gun and doing something too soon.
And let's be honest, once that scaffolder's under pressure, he's got to get going. He's got to be pushing it forward, right? Once you start, you're under program pressure. And if you then stop for 2 days, well, you lose 2 days, and wait,
under commercial pressure
for 2 days. You've got to find somewhere else for them to go before they come back. All your planning's gone to shit, whatever. Do you know what I mean? But at least with that, the cool thing about that is we were talking about it before, right? Every scaffolder's got a smartphone, or some have even got tablets now, right? And if you can see that, if you can load that model up on your phone and go, this is where it is, and mark it up on your phone, which you can do. This is the problem. I can get a notification in real time. I can say, I can see where that is. I could ring you up. You're the scaffolder. I was like, yeah, okay, I can see where it is. Send me a photograph with it. Yeah, okay, I've got it. WhatsApp to me, whatever. Yeah, I can see exactly where that is. I can change that in real time, update that model. It'll update in front of you, and you can keep going.
It's insane,
right?
isn't it?
You can keep going. But then there's cool things like, if you change the model and that part of that model is represented on a drawing, then the drawings automatically update themselves, uprev themselves, boom, one click, re-PDF, and gone. So the process is a lot quicker, but the design input is still needed, right? It's just, instead of it taking ages, it just takes, you're not replacing the designer by any stretch, you're just making their life a lot easier. And if you're a scaffolding contractor and your designer's using Scaffplan, then it's going to make it easier, right? That's what we want. So, just as one thing there. But then we were talking earlier, weren't we, about scaffolders being able to read a drawing, and an underappreciated skill that's not taught enough to scaffolders being able to read a drawing, especially as the industry is changing and more work is being done from drawings. Well, you eliminate that if they've got it all in 3D and they can see it there. They can literally see every couple of every beam where it's got to go, all in the right place.
Yeah, it's not a section of the scaffold. It's the scaffold.
They can interrogate it. They can see the depth. They can see which side of the brace it's going to go. All that stuff, it's there. Eliminates that problem. The communication is so much greater. So if you communicate better, you understand it better, what's the chance of them making a mistake? It's much less, right? So the collaboration tool we were talking about there is much more powerful. The client actually understanding what they're going to get, whether they put that straight into their 3D model, cool, you can, or whether they just look at it in the scaffold in isolation without the other bits of building or temporary works going on around it. They still understand exactly what they're going to get and what they're going to be able to do. Where they can put themselves in the position of, that guy fixing Metsec on that lift. Where's he going to be able to stand? Where's he going to be able to reach? It's literally right there. You can see it. So you don't have to explain it anymore. I used to think about the times I'd be stood in a meeting room going, look, if the lift's here, I can reach here. How are we going to do that bit? How are we going to get that bolt in? Oh, yeah, get it.
Yeah.
And be thinking about, well, that communication power is cool. So we were talking about collaboration, right? Really cool. But then look about, talking about scaffolding contractors, like, if they've got a change on site, they want a fast response. They want to get the client to collaborate on it. And when the client's collaborated on it and they've got confidence that they know what it is, then there shouldn't be less changes. There shouldn't be revisions. There shouldn't be stuff. And there shouldn't be kind of, what do you call it? Just mods to the process.
It should just be that. Well, that's what it is.
What I'm looking for. VOs. Shouldn't be variations. If all that reduces the risk, and a very clever guy works at Tone who taught me a lot about contract scaffolding and pricing and the commercial aspects of it. His name's Brian Carver, lovely fella, everyone that knows him. He used to say to me, we make more margin on contract items than we do on variations because we can plan them properly. We can get the right men, the right material at the right time to do that work, and we can hit the labour target. Whereas a variation, it's normally scrambling. You've got the men that you've got available. You might only need a labourer in a part one, and you've got 10 to advance. You can't get the right truck there with the right gear on it at the right time. They need it tomorrow. You've got to go and do it.
It's such a fallacy about that in the industry as well. There's so many people who say, they made all the money on the extras. And
they don't. Yeah. I don't. Well, I'm saying no, they don't. Like I've never run a scaffolding contracting business, so
But it's not as simple. But I'm not saying that they don't. But it's like it's not as simple as they make out.
But then
at all.
There's the misunderstanding is with the principal contractor that thinks they're getting shafted by the scaffolding contractor.
Yes, yeah.
But they don't realise the implication of saying, "Oh, mate, can you just put me 40 meters of handrail up this afternoon?"
Yeah.
No, I'm not on site, mate.
Yeah.
You stood me down last week. Oh yeah, but I need it. So you're scrambling to try and do it because you want to do it. Reactive service, blah blah blah. And then they wonder why that 40 meters of handrail cost a damn sight more than the other 100 meters of handrail they put up 3 weeks ago at the right time as planned. When you look at it per linear meter, it's not comparable. Of course, it's not comparable.
Yeah, because you've just had to drag people from
But anyway, you get people thinking like that, and there's the other piece of that is that the future for us is about training people to do it as well. Because obviously, if you buy Scaffplan, we'll train you, and that's probably our biggest USP. We'll train you in how to use it. You go and buy other software. Let's be honest, the most common one is AutoCAD or Revit. Great softwares. I used them for years and years. But if you, no one from Autodesk will come along and teach you how to do that design scaffolding. But if you buy Scaffplan, we'll teach you how to use the software, from zero to hero in the shortest period of time possible. And we've got some really cool case studies of people who've done it in the UK. They've taken on our e-learning and the support from our trainers and have just smashed it, and the tools in that's with system or tube and feed. It's cool and it's really good. And the next release is only going to make it better. So as we train them, there's this piece as well that we're thinking about. I've got a lot of experience training people how to design scaffold, not necessarily how to use the software, but we're going to give you the training on how to use the software. But if we also could give you the training on how to design scaffold, then I think there'll be a real demand for that, not just in the UK, but across the world, right? Especially because the standards in the UK are the rest of the world's got to do. I'm
raise their standards, isn't it?
I'm there's plenty of places across the world that have really high scaffold standards, but generally speaking, the UK has got one of the highest levels of health and safety requirement and the way we work and safe systems of work and all that. So as the rest of the world comes up, the requirement that 10 companies to 40 companies, design companies, and that drive of scaffold design is only going to happen everywhere else in the world as well, to a greater or lesser extent, right?
Yeah, like creating an industry almost.
So who's going to train them all? Who's going to do it? Someone's got to do it. That's what. So someone's got to step into the box.
It's almost democratizing it, I guess, in a sense that you could put that capability into the hands of, your scaffolder that's been on the tools for 30 years and started a scaffold company.
So if we can start teaching them, but obviously that'll be how I think scaffold design ought to be done. Well, not everyone might agree with that. That's fine, but they're the philosophies of the buildability, practical, commercial viability, risk management, hazard elimination, all of that stuff. Doing it right, aspiring to be to that level. Why not? We've done it. We could do it again.
So as I said, it sort of brings us full circle. Those core principles that you instilled into how 48.3 works, and how they relate to sort of leadership, culture, strategy. How does Ben Beaumont define a good leader? What is a good leader?
Well, that's a great question. What is a good leader? You ask 1,000 people, you get 1,000 different answers, right? And there's some really good answers in some, by people far cleverer than me that have thought about it. But for me, it's someone that creates other leaders around them, facilitates other people. And a great leader is circumstantial and situational, isn't it? Because you might have to. We were talking about email. Braveheart is a great leader, but that's a leader on the front line going into battle, right? That's a very different type of leader than, say, I don't know, let's think of a football analogy. We're in Manchester, so Roy Keane, right? 1990s.
I think they're probably closer than you think.
Maybe they are. Maybe
William Mollison.
Yeah, maybe so. But then
But they're in a different environment, right?
Right. And then you think of someone who is much more mild-mannered and, Barack Obama, for example, great leader, but calm, collected, influenced, facilitator, than someone who's more outspoken. And so you've different styles and they're all equally effective, but you'd have to be it's situational and it's circumstantial. I think the important thing for me, it was always something different, as it, because I took the leadership of the business really seriously, and I thought people think leaders are born. Absolute load of bollocks. Leadership is a taught skill, just like scaffolding or engineering or whatever, basketball.
Yeah, it's
Something like
probably potentially people who are more predisposed or
Well,
inclined towards a certain maybe style of leadership
just
or
not
inclined
academic.
to being leaders,
Well,
but it can be taught.
no, it totally can be taught. No one, no kid. Some people naturally gravitate towards leading the football team at school or something like that, right? But everyone can become a leader. Often people find themselves in position of leadership, right? But accidentally, scaffolder suddenly starts leading his gang, or it becomes advanced and he's got his own gang. Take case in point, they become a leader and they'll do it in their own certain way. And you think of all them different people out there in our industry that do that. People that go and start their own business, just like yourself, just like I did, just like many other people, suddenly find themselves and then you start employing people and think, oh my God. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always try to just stay one step ahead of them, because you're trying to be the leader that the business needs you to be now, and while simultaneously growing into the leader that the business needs you to be in 6 months or in a year, and staying ahead of that curve, right? And constantly doing that and growing with the company is really important. But I think to ask your question, it's never, leadership is never about you. Personally, leadership is about facilitating other people, and you've got to put other people first when you're thinking about that. Because just look at any business. Any business is built by people, right? And you talked about strategy, you talked about culture. Culture is created by people. Strategy is delivered by people. Leadership is organizing and leading and facilitating and growing people around you to go and do stuff themselves and meet their full potential and exceed their potential and grow, far in further than they would without your help or facilitation, right? So, that's, I think that's really important, and leadership in a context of business is built around various things. I'm a big believer in it being, you have to have principles, certain ways. There's a great book, Ray Dalio's book, isn't it? Principles.
Principles is a fantastic book. Yeah.
Effectively, that's his principles of leadership and business, right? Lots of them.
Yeah.
And you've got same ones, and where you learn lessons over time, where you balls things up, make a mistake, handle a situation really badly, upset someone, think, oh my God, why did I do that? We've
Yes,
all
but
been
one
there,
of the
right?
things in that book
But you learn from it.
is like radical transparency. That's one of the things that he mentions, throughout the book, is this radical transparency. And I don't know whether it's because I've got no filter, and you might be the same, but that's a principle that I definitely gravitate towards, because I just think I used to hate sitting in meetings and it being like someone would say something and then the eyes would go down and then they flash across the room. They'd look at somebody else and they'd be like,
Well,
I can't believe he's just said that.
I don't know if that's radical transparency. There's radical candor, which is a great book, but the point being there is having a safe environment where people don't feel like they're going to get blamed, criticized, whatever, where they can speak out without fear of retribution. You know what I mean? They can confidently say. And I've been, one of the things I used to be crap at is listening. Terrible, right? You what? And one of the best pieces of advice someone says to me is always speak second, speak last. Use your ears and your mouth in the ratio that you've got them. And I never used to do that.
I think this podcast has taught me that.
Ironically, that we're sitting here talking, I've probably talked more in the last 3 hours than I've done in the last 3 weeks. But it's I have to work really hard to make sure I listen. Another one, and be empathetic. Funny, someone I'll not to said to me when we're doing personality profile. We always used to do a personality profile in it. 40 I used to build teams based on personality profiles and put them together so that strengths amplified strengths and weaknesses, strengths compensated for other weaknesses. You don't want all the same types of people in the same team. Anyway, we used to do personality profiling quite a lot. And someone said to me, oh, I know your profile. I know your profile. You care a lot about people. You're empathetic. You do all this. You're a real people person. And inside, I went, all right, yeah, great. And inside, I took it as a compliment, because that's exactly opposite to my natural personality profile. I have to work really hard to do that. And I naturally just forget. You know what I mean? So I have to make a conscious effort to listen, be empathetic, and listen with intent. Listen with intent to understand, not listen with the intent to
Speak.
contribute or just dive in at the next possible gap. Do you know what I mean? And often now people are talking to me, then I'll stop and listen, and they'll think I've drifted off or something. And I'm not. You're just processing what they're saying because you want to respond, having considered what they've said. Because that's the whole point of listening, right? To understand what they're saying, not just get your next point in and ram it down the throat. Which, to be quite honest, I did for years.
Let me tell you how this relates to me. Well, okay, sometimes it's a natural kind of aspect of human communication. It's like we talk about stories and we communicate in stories, and you tell your story and say, "Oh, I've had a similar story," and it's that sharing of ideas. But I think this podcast has kind of helped me to realize that. I mean, if I look back at some of the earlier episodes, it was like I'd speak to somebody, and then I couldn't wait to get my analogy in and I'm thinking. Then now I've looked back, the last maybe 5 or 6 episodes.
Just stop me talking. I'm dying here.
The last 5 or 6 episodes, I've really been listening, as you say, with intent, and I've enjoyed them. I've enjoyed listening back to them more.
The other point, what you're saying there, where you're saying about listening to intent, stand, it's also about people's culture. It changes. There's a. I'm just name dropping books. There's a book by a lady called Erin Meyer called The Culture Map, which is really useful, really clever. It talks about how different people do different things in different part of the world, how their behaviors are different. And there's 7, I think, different criteria that she has a scale for how they are. But people's listening ability and how they interact and communicate is one of them. And it's wildly different when you take like the USA and Western Europe on one end of the scale and Japan and Asia on the other end of the scale, right? Where we're very practical and very direct communicators, whereas in Japan it's very, I've not that I've been and talked to them about it much, but based on that book, it's very inferred. They read the air, they read the
more like almost ceremonial kind of
subtle, and let's be honest. If you were in that situation and never done it before, you'd have to really concentrate and work hard to understand it, wouldn't you? But the fact that you can be, if you're not aware of it, then you have no chance. At least if you are aware of it and you've got, how different people behave, and at least you can then put the effort in and the energy to do it, right? So I think that's it. I mean, there's so many different things. You're talking about principles of leadership and stuff. Like the main ones, I wrote a bunch of them down in preparation. Like having clear values is critical, and actually acting and behaving in congruence with them all the time, even when it doesn't suit you. And then your values ultimately, and your morals and your ethics, define what the right thing is, and then doing the right thing all the time, even when no one's looking, right? But that's true.
It's Henry Ford quote, right?
It's very true. And there's an analogy in Good to Great by Jim Collins, which I've literally used since the first time I read it. Which
I think it's you recommended that to me. Actually.
Use the mirror and the window at the right time. And the mirror and the window is an analogy for leadership, which is like, if you use them at the wrong, I bet great leaders use them at the right time, and poor leaders use them at the wrong time. So when things go well, the good leader, when things go well, they look out of the window and lavish praise and recognition on the people that they see, i.e. the team and the business, whoever that is. When things go poorly, the first thing they do is look in the mirror and hold the person they see accountable before anything else. The poor leader will do it the opposite way around. When things go great, they'll look in the mirror and lavish praise on the person they see. And when things go badly, they'll look out the window and blame all the people they see. And that, in a simple process, use the mirror and the window at the right time, is just one of the easiest things to do if you're a leader and you want to do it right. In my opinion, you want to do it right.
Have you ever thought about writing a book, Ben?
Maybe I should. I've got this. I'm pretty handy.
I think so.
But mate, the thing is, it's the only parts of it. You read and talk to lots of really clever people, right? And you learn something from everything. Another great leadership. But you learn something from everyone, And as you do that, you kind of then put your spin on it, and that gradually builds the tapestry of your perception of what leadership is, right? And I've spent so much time reading books on leadership and personal development, probably more than civil engineering, and that's just because I love it and you like it, right? And there's loads of different things I've written down here. You realize that, everyone can be good when the going's good, but not everyone can be good when the going's bad. That's, it's so easy. And adversity there's a quote, I can't remember who it's by, but the quote is something like, and I'm just butchering it, but adversity has a way of introducing someone to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, you find out who you are in the hard times.
Damn right.
Yeah, and you've got these principles that are easy to pin up on a board somewhere, but how are you acting in line with those principles when the shit hits the fan?
Exactly, right? And when it doesn't suit you, or when it's hard, you know what I mean? Can you keep following the law of reciprocity? Can you keep paying it forward when you haven't got any money or you haven't got any time to give? It's hard, man. It's really hard, and that's the challenge. And I've felt that quite a few different times over the 20 years I've been, since in business or working and stuff. And that's another one. And a couple of ones to leave you, right, with, or leave you, but I'll give you this. There's people always say treat people how you want to be treated yourself, right? I say treat people how they want to be treated, because how you want to be treated is specific to you and your personality and your preferences. You actually want to treat someone how they want to be treated. So take the time to understand them, what their preferences are, what their needs are, what they like, what they don't like, and treat them accordingly, right? Because that's actually what you want to do. If you want to get the response from that person, you want to treat them how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated.
Great book.
Especially the cultural difference,
yeah.
Right?
There's a great book on negotiation by a guy called Chris Voss. I'm sure you've read it. But I think the saying in that book is letting the other side have it your way. And you're trying to understand what they need in order to put the deal or whatever the negotiation is to them in
the
terms that they
facilitator of that is a black swan, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
It's a great book. That's one. You're right. Yeah, I love that book. That's on my list of book recommendations. If you were to
we could do a whole other podcast on book recommendations, I think.
And the other one is,
I mean, the one that just sorry to cut you off slightly, but the other one that I think
I thought you weren't doing that.
I really wanted to.
Was that? I thought it was always.
It's just when you were talking, I was like, what you're saying sounds so much like talking with strangers or talking to strangers. It's the Malcolm Gladwell book, right?
I haven't read it.
You must have read Talking to Strangers. You're fucking pulling my leg. But yeah, fascinating book, and I think it speaks to that. Those little cultural differences and try to understand the other side.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah, you're definitely right. There's another one. There's the sheep and the crabs story. Tell this quite a bit, right? There's this. If a fisherman has a bucket of crabs, and he puts all the crabs in the bucket, with no lid on, no crabs will never escape. Even though the crabs have got all the capability to climb up and out of the bucket, they totally could. They've got they're big enough, they're strong enough, they can get out and they could jump off the boat back into sea and live a happy life. But no, they don't. Do you know why they never escape the bucket?
I do, but I'd like you to tell us.
For the benefit of it, just not jumping in there. You told your tongue like, oh. Yeah, because the other, if one tries to leave, the other crabs pull them back. So you need to avoid crab. They're the analogy of the people that just never want to see you succeed or never want to support you and give you a leg up rather than pulling you back down all the time. So avoid the crabs in life. And then if you're going to be a sheep, you only want to be a black sheep, right? Because they're the ones that go the contrarian view. Everyone else, don't be a sheep.
Yes.
And that was always the same in the business I've run. Try and do something different. Try and be something different. Whether that's strategy, how you treat people, all the different ways, the values, the training of people, the development, the amount of times the black sheep conversation would come around, like when we were launching 48.3's strategy and people thought it was nuts. And literally people would tell me I'm crazy and we're going to fail. Fast forward 5 years, they're copying what we did. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives you that little satisfaction, of doing it. You rewind 6 years ago, no one was doing fully integrated scaffold design with the scaffold, the interfaces, the ground checks, the buried structure checks, the permanent works checks in the temporary condition. No one was packaging that up as one piece. Scaffold designers designed scaffold. Right now, there's loads of people that do that.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And plenty of people, the people that are doing that now, told me 6 years ago I was mental and should never do it.
I'm going to finish on a quote, and hopefully you'll see this as a massive, compliment. It's that old quote of a specialist or someone who's good at what they do will hit a target no one else can hit, but a genius hits a target nobody else can see. And sometimes you've just got to, despite what people are telling you, that won't work. Everybody's tried it before. It's not going to happen. You've just got to be steadfast and have the resolve to go, do you know what? I think this is going to work. And there's no guaranteed payoff. But when it does, if it does, people look back and say, you're a genius. And you're like, I was just fucking muddling my way through and making it, punching it up on the fly. But Ben, it's been fascinating. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you on. I'm really privileged that you've spent the time with us and shared your insights, because I think a lot of people are going to get a great deal of value out of it. And I know you're a busy man. You're presenting an award at it's the IC Awards tonight, right?
Yeah.
So best of luck with that. By what I've seen so far, I doubt there's going to be any stage fright.
I think you're only going to say one word, and the winner is. Let's hope the company name not unpronounceable.
Ben, absolutely
My pleasure.
brilliant to have you on, and can't wait to have you back for the next one where we do the book reviews.
Yeah, all right.
Another episode in and of itself. Ben, thanks.
Cheers, mate.
I truly hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, all I ask is that you like, subscribe, and get notified every time we drop a new episode.